Right, so feet down, sitting upright, and just your feet in line. Rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. And then over your head and neck. Shoulder, arm. The other side. Upper part of the chest. Belly. And your legs. Right. Rest back. Take a couple of slow, gentle breaths. Give yourself just that time and space to settle in. This is not a process you can speed up, but it is a process you can slow down by doing the wrong thing, as it were. What we try and do is just establish really a familiar routine. Noticing your breathing, noticing your posture, just noticing when any areas of stiffness and tightness in your body, and then looking a little bit deeper, trying to get that feeling of just dropping back into your chair, letting go of the sort of urge to hold a particular posture, just feel comfortable in the way that you're sitting. And just get these glimpses of a kind of process of settling. One image I quite like is that it's like resting a jar of muddy water on a table. And if you just leave it there, eventually the mud settles. But if you try anything to sort of speed it up, it invariably will stir it up again. And there's no guarantee of about how long it's going to take. A lot will depend on what's been going on here. If you've been busy rushing around for the class, you might find it just takes a bit longer to settle. So there's no sort of hard and fast rule about this. But even those times when you feel it's not working, if you have been busy or you've got a lot on your mind, you keep thinking about it, keep sort of slipping back into those various sort of storylines. It doesn't mean saying that nothing is changing. Some of the most difficult times I've experienced or trying to do Tai Chi, and you get halfway through and thinking, not at all focused, it's not going well. You just persevere. By the time you get to the end of the session, it's like, actually, I feel much better now. So, which of course is one of the aims. It's good to have really good sessions to feel you're developing and advancing and learning more, but it's not going to be always like that. Now, put your feet in, moving forwards a little bit, finding a good position in your chair. Just tilting forwards a little bit so that you feel a slight sense of pressure in the soles of your feet. You're supported by your feet, supported by your hips and by the chair beneath your hips. And once again, just giving yourself a bit of time and space to settle in. Feel the feeling of your shoulders dropping down towards your rib cage. And then your rib cage dropping down towards your hips, so that everything seems to just flow downwards through your body. And then just consider what's, in a sense, left behind. If you can get all this sort of, if you like, the soft tissue in your ribs and so on and so forth drop, there remains this stronger feeling supporting you from within. Then just slowly turning your head. And then hands in front of your shoulders. So the movements themselves become up another focus for our attention, of course, quite a strong focus for our attention. It's very easy as you become more familiar with these movements for that attention to slip away, especially with these earlier movements. Try and avoid the idea of concentrating on the movement. I think concentration is a difficult term going forwards. I can think of drawing in or gathering our attention or herding our attention, gently encouraging our attention to come back to the movements, the postures underlying them. Hands down by your sides, rotating your arms, palms forwards, and then just round as far as it's comfortable to get. And then winding around, so you're winding up thread of silk thread or cotton or some such. The different images and ideas that we introduce become part of the focus of our attention. We need to be careful that they don't distract us. Sometimes we can associate a whole kind of storyline with the image if we're not careful. Go back the other way. Yeah. Tilting forwards a little, more of your weight going into your feet, and then that gentle push down. Either push down, an active push through your legs, in which case you feel the legs being loaded, like a set of springs being loaded, and just notice the point at which you allow the legs to push you back. So you go as far as you can below the legs, but if you go too far, then things start to tighten up in your legs and your back. You want to stop just before that, let the movement push you back. And the same thing more subtly, in, your hips and your lower back. Or you can take that awareness a little bit deeper into your body. Imagine here in the belly, you've got like a ball, a soft ball, and as you go forward, that ball compresses. And then again, before it gets too much of a struggle, you let the ball expand and the ball will push down through your feet. So you still get that push up from the feet, you still got that connection to the ground, but it comes from somewhere slightly deeper within your body. Either way is fine. The ball idea, I think, is probably best seen as a progression from the sort of sense of pushing down through your feet. And again, partly it will depend on what's appropriate for you to look at, how it's appropriate for you to view the movement at the moment. And then turn in a little. That turn is definitely in hips and waist. And then in the other direction. And around. And back the other way. Feeling the weight moving, and in that image of the ball was helpful. You could almost feel the ball rolling around in the middle of your body. Change direction. Feel how the movement in the center of your body moves your shoulders, moves your head forward, move your arms. You may even feel a bit of movement in your arms. And then push one knee up, step forwards, plant the foot, and back. By planting, the heel, and then the toes go down, and then there's just a gentle pressure from your hip down through your leg, so you're pushing your foot into soft sand. Just taking the time to really feel that contact with the floor. On the other side, all of these things that we notice, if we repeat them over and over again, if we do them on a regular basis, we gradually train our brain and our nervous system to recognize these things, and it becomes kind of intuitive, and they begin to flow over into other things that we do in our life, walking down the road, or walking around the kitchen, or whatever. So some of the more difficult ideas, like that one of pushing the feet into the ground, maintaining the awareness, are much better trained with very simple movements. Because it was a complicated move, oh, it's this one, no, is it this way or this way? There's nothing wrong with thinking like that, but it's just that then would occupy a great deal of your attention. So now, hands out to your sides again, in the same way, palms of your hands facing forward. Now, tilt forwards as you rotate your arm. The hands remaining in line below your shoulders from the side. They're out from there, but you can see there that I'm not doing this or anything. Whatever forward and backward movement there is really in transfer of your weight. So this introduces another aspect of the movement in Tai Chi, which is to do with our arms and our hands, how they follow the movement and retain a kind of quieter quality. This time, just simply stop turning your arms, let them swing forwards and backwards for fisherman castanet, and following your shoulders again. There's always this sense of pulling until I reach here, and then the arms swing through, and then I go back. I'm pulling on the arms until I settle into the upright posture, and again the hands swing through again. So we can think again of that ball in the belly, because as I go forwards and I compress the ball, it gets squeezed sideways and forwards and backwards. So we get a sense of the energy behind this movement. We can also appreciate what's happening in our chest and ribs, and our upper back and shoulder blades, because there's little movements there that build on that basic transfer of the weight. We're gradually becoming aware that all movements really engage one way or another the whole body, rather than just our arms. And this very special quality of the whole body moving, the quality of the movement that we associate with that, it's very, very characteristic of Tai Chi. And when we lose that, then the first thing to do is to sort of go back to that awareness of your feet and whatever is happening in your weight and your hips and your pelvis, and check that that's correct before you put too much attention into your arms and your hands. Now this time, imagine the ball underneath your arms, coming back, so your arms are drawn over the ball. So the main feeling in your arms is not that you're having to lift them, but that you're pulling on them. Retaining that quiet quality, and aware now, again, of two complementary movements in the upper body, an extension through your back and your spine here, which then begins to contract. And as it contracts, an expansion upwards from your hips through your belly and your chest, like a wave pushing up through the body and then draining away again. Turning your hands palm in, pigeon spreads its wings. Pull back, feel the contraction again, between your shoulder blades, your chest opening, closing. And then changing once again, this time letting your hands come back, elbows go out a little bit. So this is a little bit of opening and closing in chest and upper back, pushing away or pushing about. Now, just loosely fist your hands, keep them just above your legs as they go forwards and backwards, but rotate them. There's quite a strong rotation in the shoulders. Try and resist the urge to sort of lift your hands. As you go forwards, like the shoulders pushing your hand away. The arm straightens a little bit, but not completely. Still a bend in the elbow, and then rotating as you pull back. Don't take your elbow behind your hip. So it's a relatively small movement here. See where my elbow ends up, and then here, it's only just here, or thereabouts. And again, open your fingers. Now this time, turn your hands out, winding around. Pushing through. One more time. Come back, turn your hands palm down, turn. Feel your hips sinking back and your pelvis tilting forwards. Turn back the other way, so your hips are moving in that direction now, and then come back to the upright position. Go in the other direction, hips dropping back. As a result, because your shoulders are going forwards, this feeling of extension through the spine and your back. Expanding outwards and contracting it. Another way. One more round of this. And then change into the vertical movements. Turn your hands palm up. This time, the press down, or however you're visualizing it, press down through the feet and the hips, alternately, or this ball expanding. But now that all translates to a vertical movement. So if it's feet and hips you're thinking of, then you want to try and press down through them gently at the same time. If it's the ball, then that will achieve that anyway. What we start to get is this nice sort of almost tingly feeling up and down our back and spine, shoulders nice and relaxed. So you're moving through water, so there's more resistance around you, encouraging you to soften in your joints, move in a more coordinated and more complete way. Change into the wild goose. And then parting the clouds, easing forwards, let your hands crossed just a little in front of your knees and sit back and push up. Extending out gently. One more time. Lovely. Now let your hands drop down. Dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So it's more difficult, I think, with these vertical movements to get that sense of how we're using feet and hips, and the other movements working up through our body. When we move the weight forwards and backwards, there's a very clear view from the outside, you know, our shoulders moving, for instance. Here it starts to become a lot more subtle because obviously you want that expansion and contraction up and down through the body, of course, but you don't see the sort of my head going up and down. That would be way too big a movement, and I'd end up straining my back anyway. So a lot more of a focus inwardly. Now I'm going to do both hands together. So bring your hands around in front of your belly, again pushing down. Hands are palm up, but this time they rotate a little bit. Press up a little bit further. There's a lengthening and contraction through your back. And That lengthening and contraction for the second movement just expand into a sideways movement. Remember, as though you're moving through water. And then one foot out, just rest on your heel, ease forwards. So that slight pull through the back of your leg, going up into your spine and ease back. So once again, when we feel something like a pull, or talked earlier about feeling a bit of pressure, we want to make that distinction between that being a strong but comfortable quality and one that involves the body somehow kind of clenching, tightening up. And there's a very different feel to that kind of stiffening quality. Sometimes it could be a little bit painful even. And so we're working to what is sometimes referred to as the soft boundary of the movement. We want the boundary to extend, most certainly, but we don't want it to lose its softness, permeability. And now this time, you get to here, loosely fist your hands, coming back and grasping the tiger's ears. A difficult movement to get with the arms swinging out and up. But the swinging movement isn't so very different to this little movement that we did earlier. And the upward movement, come here, I go forwards and my back is taking that sort of angle and lengthening, and my arms are hanging behind slightly. So there's an extension here as well. And then everything that can contract and brings your hands over. So the movements become quite complex when we begin to view them more internally. So we learn the movements, we learn from the outside in. But as we become more familiar with different movements, and it will vary from movement to movement, from person to person, by observing what's going on when we make the movement, by having an idea that we're going to just remain quite soft in the body, we're not going to strain, we begin to notice how the body makes those movements. And then we have an opportunity to work out, well, this is quite a good way, this not so good, and so on and so forth. And then grasping the tiger's ear. One more time. Now, forwards and backwards, but with a turn. So you go forwards and you turn maybe to your left foot, come back to the middle, turn towards your right foot as you go forwards. Put your hands in front of you. Feel how your arms follow the movement. Again, shoulder pushing on elbow, elbow pushing on wrist. And so what that will do is push your fingers forwards and then just swing up. Turn the hand palm down. And as they go through the middle here, the hands are in line with each other. And we push up on the other side, hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. So it's a strong dynamic movement, this one. The idea of hitting the ball carries those qualities. And we achieve that strength, that power that moves the hand, not simply through moving the arm, but as much as possible through the whole of our body. Remember the different ideas, a push from the hips, a push from the feet, a ball being compressed and then expanding, a lengthening to our back, and so on and so forth. All of those ideas. This all takes us closer to the sort of concept, if you like, of the chi, which I think in this context can be seen as being a term that is used when the three elements of body, mind, and energy begin to work as one. One more to each side. And then just letting your hands come to rest. Once again, giving yourself a moment to come back to that settled, quiet feeling. Yeah. Once again, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Arms. The other side. Upper part of the chest. The belly. Before we go down to the legs, just pushing the knees up. So feeling calf muscles, thigh muscles, just sort of pumping a little bit. Not sort of tight or anything like that. Really, it's quite soft when you get the circulation going through them. And then keep the knees up and move around in a circle. Try and feel the rotation into your hip joint. And back the other way. And then back to the tapping, this time on your legs. Then if you want to stand, just stand. I move my chair out the way so I don't bump into it, but as always, you can use the chair for support. You can use the chair to investigate things like the step in and that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be for support, but sometimes, just as in the chair, certain things are not isolated, but you can focus on a particular movement because you haven't got so many things to think about. So if you're wondering about, well, how do I take that step? Then actually supporting yourself, the support to the wall means I can go, oh, well, I've got time, got space to play around with these things. What does it feel like there? What does it feel like there? And so on and so forth. But first of all, your feet parallel. Sinking down, bring the hands around, doing a little set of 3 movements. Pushing up and sinking back, down into your hip. Change to the wild goose. And then parting the clouds. And then again, just begin to notice those internal qualities. And one of the reasons for sort of linking these movements is because there's a lot of similarities, but also differences. And it's those little subtle differences between one movement and another that are quite interesting here. So when we do the first one, just focus on the expansion in belly, lower back, that's where you'll feel it mostly. You feel that again as you begin the wild goose, but it moves up. You feel a broadening, a widening, if you like, across the solar plexus. And then again, belly to solar plexus, and finally upper part of the chest and arms. And then starting again. So we feel the expansion within the body, progressively building. And again, we want to just keep viewing those movements until we feel that rather than the arms producing that movement, it's the other way around. It's that feeling of expansion moving up through the body that moves the arms forwards. We get a much softer movement in the arms there. And this is quite a useful way because we feel the progression. Yeah. And when we get to parting the clouds, just see how it feels to take a breath in as you do this. If it's tight or uncomfortable, then leave it. But that movement, expanding in belly, expanding in solar plexus, expanding in chest, is actually the same process that we want to feel with the in-breath. Now, it may not be comfortable for you right now. That's not the end of the world. And as I always say with the breath, we shouldn't be trying to force this. But every now and then you might want to just refer to this. And again, the knock-on effect of this isn't necessarily that you can keep to a particular breathing method or a particular breathing pattern while you're doing the exercises, but a very subtle overall improvement of your breathing and indeed your posture, because you can't breathe well if your posture's out. So one more time. Good. And then just give your legs a shake. So always remember that breathing and posture and movement are very, very interlinked. So if it's not quite working out with your breathing, don't sort of force it or anything. But just the act of thinking about it will actually help you to improve in your breathing overall. And sometimes having a sense of this is how I want to breathe also encourages the body to find a posture that allows that. It should never be strained. Now, 1 foot forwards, easing forwards and backwards. And in general, what we want to feel is whatever the movement is meant to do with the breathing or a particular pattern with the arms or whatever, we want to feel always that the movement comes from the ground upwards. There's always a moment of just settling into the ground or feeling in one way or another that push. And again, this could be a deliberate, right, I'm going to push through my leg. And that's not a bad way of thinking of it. It's quite good, especially at the start. But we could also think, well, there's a ball there and we sink down in it and the ball will eventually reach that point where, like in the seated, it starts to expand. And what will happen is the ball would actually tend to push us up. But we take that movement, that energy, and we direct it forwards and down into the front leg. Later, when we come to move the arms as well, it won't just be from leg to leg, of course. Some of that movement will come up through the body and out in various ways, moving the arms forwards. But for the moment, just concentrate on what's happening in the legs. But retain a sense of your awareness to just notice what's happening in the upper part of your body. Raising your toes and your heel. When we move from the ground, we're more likely to be able to maintain good posture, well-aligned posture, and so on. Just like a plant grows best if the seed and the root are good. You move from the ground, everything above moves with you. If you move from your shoulders, for instance, if you lean, you can leave the legs behind. That's what happens when we trip, isn't it? Something catches our legs, we can no longer move our legs, but our shoulders are still moving. Stepping in. And then on the other side. And with that being, the shoulders dropping, ribs dropping, and so on. Step in. I've just turned my front foot out very, very slightly to open up my front hip. Back foot is already turned out, so it's unnecessary to do anything more there. That helps with just giving the space for my weight to drop down, but it shouldn't be too big an angle. So I'm not sort of turning it right out there, for instance. And then stepping through, and we'll plant the foot. If you can, more difficult when you step in, remember that feeling of just, once the foot's on the floor, just a gentle press in, like you're walking on soft sand or a slippery surface. You're not quite sure of the contact. It's quite a difficult thing to do, I find. And of course, one of the things that we need to think about, if you were walking on soft sand, then what would happen is the sand would give a little bit. But on a hard floor, it's not the sand that would give. You need to just kind of soften your feet, the soles of your feet a little. This is quite difficult, I think. We often hold our feet very tight. You know, our toes curled in or pulled back or something like that. Especially, you know, if you've got corns, for instance, and there's the pain there, there's often a kind of reluctance to do that. So it's quite a difficult thing to do. Again, it's something you can practice in the chair. Now, have your right foot forwards. Start with your weight back and hands on your belly. Push forwards, and now we feel the movement coming up a little bit, expanding in belly, solar plexus and chest again. That same progression up through the body for pigeon spreads its wings and then back. So again, you know, we could try just taking an in-breath here every now and then. Just letting the out-breath come quite naturally. Again, knowing time, if you practice this every now and then, and I don't mean every time by any means, will gradually improve your breathing, your lung capacity. My habit is to refer back to my breath every now and then, but not to try and keep to a very particular breathing pattern or even method the whole time. But usually these days when I check in with my breath, it's okay. One more time. And then your hands drop and fisherman cast the net. Breathing is the other way around for this. If you want to breathe in pattern, you breathe in here, like you're filling up your body, and then breathing out through your arms is the image. And the same for here when we go into pushing away. One more time. Okay, and then on the other side, pigeon spreads its wings. Fisherman cast a net. and pushing away. One more time. And bring it down. Lovely. Time to go back to the chairs. There's a variety of things that we can focus our attention on. And going back to this idea of that words like concentration, the trouble with thinking of concentration is it can become very tunnel vision. I quite like this interpretation of some of the Eastern terms that we translate as concentration as a kind of gathering, a herding process. So I think it's useful training to try and maintain a focus of attention. But I don't think it's useful to take that to an extreme where you kind of must think about the breath, must think about this, must think about that. Everything tightens up at that point. It's quite natural for our thoughts to drift, and in fact, it's quite a positive thing where we monitor the environment around us. For instance, what we want to be able to do is to not let that get out of hand. I suppose you could say, not to sort of like drift away completely. So if you find that maybe you're thinking about the breathing or you're thinking about rooting down, and then you can feel your attention beginning to edge away and get a bit distracted, try bringing it back to whatever you were thinking about, certainly. But if there's a resistance to that, go, okay, think about something different, find another aspect of the movement to focus on. And sometimes it's what's appropriate. It might be that often when I train in the morning, I find because it's quite rough and it's uneven, suddenly I realise, I've got to really pay a bit more attention to my footing and so on and so forth. And you gradually learn to do that, to have a focus for your attention that is partly comes out of the particular circumstances that you're in, but without losing a sense of what else is going on. It's like if you're walking along with a friend and you've got to cross the road, you can be chatting to them, but you've got to cross the road. So you start looking for where the best place to cross the road is, and then there's a turn, and you say, let's cross the road now, kind of thing. Because so that kind of all-round awareness is the sort of thing that we're trying to cultivate. Grandmaster Chen Xiaowang has this phrase where he says we should look ahead and listen behind. An old Southern Indian martial art called Kalipalat has a phrase where it says that the body becomes all eyes. And these are both ideas that point us at a point, not at the five senses, of course, but really what underlies the five senses, which is that we use our different senses to build up a picture of what's going on. Imagine walking into a kitchen where somebody's cooking. There'll be the smell, you might even get a sense of taste, there'll be sounds, there'll be sights, and all of those give you an impression of what's going on in that space and where you fit into that space. So it's this movement drawing back, embracing tiger, returning to mountain. Just push out. Your arms come around as though you're holding the ball against your chest. Drawing in and settling down. Easy and gently. One more time. And rest. Okay, so just to remind you, there won't be a class this coming Thursday, so then we'll be back here next Tuesday. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.